All right. Normally, I'd be demonstrating this technique in front of you and you could see it. Of course, it's so much better to actually see it, have it in front of you. This was one I did 1/4. This is another one just to show that repetition of that same kind of that goat head. And these big platters allowed me to show a lot of other things with the underglaze and the slip. And in that face-to-face mode, it's better, but I'm gonna be able to convey the basic technique here for you. And it's a great technique, so I hope you enjoy this. Okay, so hummingbirds are flying south right now, so I thought I'd do a hummingbird. If you want to do a lot of them, you can stack up a bunch of newsprint behind it. Make sure you're cutting on a good cutting board and make sure you have a really brand new sharp blade. And you can see next to my fingernail, it's pretty detail oriented. You can get pretty fine lines as the demo pieces that are in the studio. You can check those out. It's kind of time consuming, and make sure when you're coming to details, you cut really carefully. You cut slowly, get through the first layer, get through the next layer, and I'll show you when I'm all done. Okay, one thing I like about this technique is if you think about repetition or repeating the image, even if it's reversed, you can always think about these being flipped over. Be careful with them. The other way too, like they don't have to totally repeat exactly the same way. So if it's flipped over, you can get that silhouette of the bird or the object or the shape, whatever. If it's representational or abstract, it could be a symmetrical, or in this time, an asymmetrical shape that would be able to be played with, both kind of going left and going to the right. The other thing I like is the negative space of the paper after you've cut through it. And what I just did was I cut through, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 layers. So the timing in getting the detail of that beak or into those legs, it's about the same amount of time to make one as it is to make, this time, 8. That's using a good cutting board like this. If you're cutting on top of a big stack of newspaper, you could feasibly just keep going. But the details get a little weaker as you get into like the 5th or 6th layer. And so even with this, my beak didn't come out too well on this one, for instance. So let me show you that as it degrades, you don't get it perfect. But if it's a simple shape, it'd be really easy. All right, now the difference between using this printer paper kind of paper compared to a newsprint is that the newsprint's more flexible and goes around curves nicer sometimes. So whenever you're doing real detail, that's one issue. And the other thing about the negative space issue, if you use these on a smaller piece, it's harder to get that to wrap around without this like opening up more as it goes around a curve. So on flatter like plate forms or wall pieces, these are probably easier to use during that time. So again, I think there's Aaron Frumsky, Eva Kwong, and so many people that I've seen using this technique. I can't remember exactly where I learned it from. I think I learned it from Eva Kwong. And there's a great ceramicsdaily.org video by Aaron that you can check out. And there's all these different techniques, like I brought up, that you're going to slowly learn. I hope this one helps you with something. The next step is to show you how to apply this to the surface of a piece. All right, again, thinking about if you're doing a wall piece or utilitarian piece, sculptural directions, you think about that composition. And also in a cup, I joked about it in one time where it's like right there, center base, So I might think about like having the bird off here, having part of it going that way, or vice versa, coming into there. So what is the type of clay that you want to have Do you want it bone dry? Do you want it super wet off the wheel? Maybe on the wheel you can try this, but you can't get these off really quickly. And so I like to have it at a cheese hard or leather hard stage that's you can handle it without, if it's utilitarian especially, and without warping it a lot. And so a leather hard stage that is maybe, slowly losing, and there's no tackiness to it, okay? So there's no tackiness. There's two ways to think about applying this paper resist to the surface. And one is to think about how you can moisten the surface of the piece itself, and the other is to moisten the actual template. I'm going to moisten the surface of the piece in this one. And so I'm going to use my spray bottle for that. I'll pull it over here, do that. I don't want it drippy, so you can see some sheen on it, right? I might do it a little bit more actually, but I don't really want it drippy. But I want it to have nice wetness to the surface, so when I choose the positioning of this piece of paper, that it starts to stay down, okay? So you see how it's kind of plopping up in the beak there. So I might then do the other thing, where now I have moistened the paper after I have it stuck to some degree. If I moisten just the paper, sometimes it wrinkles too much. And here is the trick, okay? So I like to spray a little on the table, and I like to just use my fingers. And what you want to make sure is you see on here, you see how the slip or underglaze could flow under there. So I want to go around to all of these areas, and what I like to do is get a slurry of clay around the edges of all of these and have that clay hold that template in place and have that area really fixed down. I don't care if the middle is really fixed down. If there's a bubble there or whatever, that's okay. But I care about the edges. So maybe really focus on all these edges. Now, edges that have real detail, as we look at like the beak here, if we get into that beak, I wouldn't want to, so I'm going with the beak, not against it. I wouldn't want to run my finger up towards the paper. And you don't want to press too hard or you might rip those little details off. So if I was rubbing on this paper, getting this slurry going, and I pulled too hard on the surface, what would happen is that paper would tear. So you can see that slurry right here especially. See that slurry building up? That's what I want. Not too much, just enough, okay? And there actually is a little bubble there, big deal. All right, so I'm gonna get that all fixed down and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, I've got several different ones on here to try and play with the whole surface all the way around. And I'm gonna talk about, this is not a necessity to just use one color or two colors. I'm gonna go around with this more rutile slip, which kind of goes golden and yellow in the kiln first. And I don't really like to go against like the beak. I like to go with it. Any kind of details, I like to kind of go with that detail, so I don't take the brush and abrasively lift any little detail. But sometimes you really don't have that ability, and then you forget sometimes too. So, all right, so I've got this color. It's kind of golden to blue. Sometimes rutile goes nice and blue in the kiln too. And I've really done a good coat there. Sometimes if you do a thinner coat, you have better success. thicker coats sometimes hold the paper down when you're pulling it up, so we'll hope that that is not the case. And then below it, I'm going to just do a black. So I'll do this commercial black, this velvet jet black. This Rutile is just a basic white slip, and you can make your own underglazes pretty easily by taking that basic white, whatever temperature you're working with. Take a slip that's formulated to that, mix the sucker up, and add your colorants. So I'm covering this whole thing pretty well. I don't like this black slip on the bottom, so I'm going to be a little careful because it does kind of vitrify in the wood kiln. All right, now the key is to wait a while. But I can also think about other kind of ways to work the surface while that is still on. I can think about working linear elements around here that would, let's see, if I can see the paper, I can see it there, I can go, whoop. And that line is broken by the paper, so when you pull the paper off, it'll be there. Thinking about like what's behind it basically. So I'm trying to think what's behind that shape or that figure or that, in this case, that bird. So I have to do a lot of things. I'm going to just kind of let you see some of this timing because you cannot pull the paper off really. Well, you can, but sometimes you don't have a lot of success if you pull it off while the slip's still wet. So I'm going to give it a little bit of time. Let that, see that sheen on there? I want that sheen. You see the sheen on the black especially. I want that sheen to dissipate before I pick off the paper. I'll show you that next step in a minute. All right, so it's still got a little shine, but I just want to force this through, and maybe I'll have a mistake on this to show you, but if you lay down a bunch, one of the things is I started here, I made it over here, I just played with a bunch of stripes to show you that there. And you gotta find the paper, and you gotta pick up an edge, and usually a needle tool works really good for that. You're gonna scratch into your piece a little there, maybe, but and then you slowly pull this paper away. The reason why you gotta start with that one is because if it's overlapping, sometimes that's a good thing to do, or you find the overlap. And then it makes it easier to pull off the next one. So you're not gonna always get it all off in one piece. It really feels good when you do. And sometimes it's a little precarious. And like that detail of that beak, for instance, I wanted to peel it off that way. if you get into this and get it off in one piece, one of the things that you can do is take that actual piece of paper that you peeled off, flip it over, spritz it, flip it over, do a monoprint with it, which is a different technique. There is a band performing next door in my garage here. It's called Wave Songs. They're practicing their songs. So a little background music during this demo. But. All right, and so now you see that leaves that positive image that allows you to do other things or just leave it as a silhouette image on your piece. And what you can see is like how the detail comes in on this beak here, or where the feet are grasping the branch here. So you get a sense that you can do a lot of detail. The one example piece I have in the studio that has the daylilies all on it, that's super fine detail, and you can get that. It's just really, as you saw me peeling it away, it's a little more about picking that paper off as you do it, okay? So I'm gonna do some sgraffito work here too. Just like show you with graphically against the black and this porcelaneous stoneware. So you don't see a lot of contrast around the beak right now, but when these slips vitrify out, the colors get pretty intense compared to this. And sgraffito at this stage, compared to if I wait a while, if I wait till it's a lot harder, I could use a needle tool and get finer lines, but I'm getting these like linear elements that are different than brush, different than the paper stencils, and it's just another, again, way to play with it. You can use these sgraffito tools. A lot of companies make them. Kemper makes them, Dolan makes them. You could also take a bent paper clip and just put it onto a dowel rod. All right, I did a lot of sgraffito work on it just to show you the detail kind of come up in there. And carving back through that slip to play with the composition more and think about linear elements. All right, so again, all these different things to like think about when you're doing this. This is an older demo piece I did for some students. You can see this lack of contrast. This is an owl at night. So I didn't want it to be really contrasting with an owl. I was like trying to tell a story with this, about this owl in my backyard, swooped down on me. It was pitch black out. All I could hear was this quiet sound. And so like with this bowl, I've tried to incorporate that technique into it to discuss this idea of detail. On the ones that I'm going to show you here after this, you can see that there's a way to play with detail. There's a flower that has tons of detail. So thinking about it compositionally, as you're looking at your piece, those are some other little details to pull to your mind. Like, how are you going to compose this piece? So a couple other things that when it comes to the detail on it, the paper does get fragile when it's wet. You know, you've seen paper just tear when it's wet, and you got to be a little more delicate. So the one demonstration piece I did with the flowers has all of these little thin pieces of paper. That was a dumb piece for me to do it as a demo because it took a lot longer for me to show students how to get the slurry over it. So I've learned like do real simple shapes, but it doesn't mean that you can't do it. So you see that black slip over a white piece, and I'm going to show you that, all those pieces right now. Examples sitting on the table in the studio, check those out. These are just demonstrations of that technique that I did for previous classes. So the video on this paper stencil technique, think about how you can also do not just the stencil, but some kind of sgraffito or carving back through the slips, okay? So these are a little dirty and dusty, but they're good examples of some past demonstrations, thinking about how you can play with this technique. Again, just one application more for how you might apply and resist that underglaze or slip. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned a lot. Let me know if you have any questions, any more information on this that I can try and give clarity to. Let me know. Love to talk to you about it.